Okay, welcome back. We're going to be doing a physical mutations tier list because defect tier list is really successful. Now our first physical mutation is Adrenal Control. I'm just going to put this in can be good. It costs a lot of points and you cannot modify the amount of time your adrenaline is flowing, and there's better things you could spend 4 points on unless you're trying a build where you have a ton of different physical mutations and you couldn't hope to ever level them all up to 10. Next one is Beak. I'm actually going to put this in good, even though it's a 1-pointer. You get 2 interpretation of birds. It's 1 mutation point for 1 ego point. A good choice for hybrids with an extra point or 2 to spare. Then we have Burr and Claws. Now this actually depends. Not only is it in the depends tier, depends on whether you have pre-release content enabled. If you have pre-release content enabled, you can dig stairways of this, which would probably immediately put it into the great, maybe even the overpowered tier. But if you don't have pre-release content enabled, which I'm assuming you don't, it's just in depends. You can dig through walls, and that's about it. It doesn't do that much damage, even though it has an unlimited penetration cap. The next one is Carapit. I'm going to say Carapit is a pretty solidly good mutation in most circumstances. You can get a lot of armor from it, makes tortoises friendly, which is kind of nice, and more importantly than anything else, it gives you lots and lots of heat and cold resistance. By rapidly advancing this once, you could get 70 to heat and cold with just 1 rapid advancement, which is quite easy and realistic to get, which makes you almost immune. In fact, at level 10, with no rapid advancements, you would get 55, meaning, combining with Weathered, you'll be able to get 70 baseline heat and cold resistance, making you take only 30% damage. And from there, it's quite easy to cover the remaining 30%. So I'm going to put it in good. It's only 3 points too. We have Chimera. Chimera, I think it's a pretty solidly good mutation too. It's only 1 point, and the extra limbs can be really, really nice. And then we have Corrosive Gas Generation. I'm going to say it is pretty good. It can do a ton of damage. It's a great zoning tool, especially in the early game. And it's in general very utilitarian. It's a very utilitarian ability, and can do almost anything you want it to. The next one is Double Muscled. I'm just going to put this in can be good. It's more of a point dump than anything else. You have some extra points, you put it in this. The Daze Chant seems really, really good, but it's very rare for you to actually stun an enemy, and dazing is not actually very strong with a negative effect. It only reduces agility by 4, intelligence by 4, and move speed by 10. And while that's a decent, if you have it at the high levels, you can get that almost all the time on anything, it's just not enough to justify spending 3 points for a few extra points of strength. Next up with Lexical Generation, I'm going to say this depends on what you're trying to do. If you're going to be using a lot of charge, you can do a lot of really crazy things with this, but it's not the best early game. But you can do for one thing, you can power a force bracelet indefinitely, which means an infinite force field around you, and you can also use it to power laser weapons indefinitely, meaning you not only have a force field, but you can attack indefinitely out of it, which is obviously ridiculously overpowered. However, it's 4 points, and it doesn't have too many uses. Combine that with the fact that while it does do a lot of burst damage, and is affected by willpower, it has a tendency to anger everyone near you due to the splash, so I'm just going to put it in the pens. And then Electrical Pulse, which again is in the pens. It's only 2 points, but it doesn't really affect that many things. It mostly depends on how many robots you plan on fighting. And it can disable them for a long time, depending on, but even the biggest area of effect probably wouldn't be able to save you from something like a Chrome Pyramid. Next we have Flaming, which I'm going to put in depends. It's 4 points. It can do decent damage, and you can get really, really low cooldown with especially with high willpower. But lighting someone on fire isn't really all that good. And it's 4 points. That's a lot of points that you can spend on something else. And for many of the same reasons, I'm going to put freezing in the pen as well. It's 5 points, 1 point more than even Flaming Ray. And the brittle temperature is, I think, very good. Makes it harder for you to get frozen. And freezing things is a lot more impactful than burning them, but eventually you're going to have to accept the fact that some enemies just can't be frozen. Chrome Pyramids, for example, have 96 for every resistance except Lexical, which is at negative 75, meaning that there are some things you just can't stop with it, and for 5 points, I don't think that's really acceptable. Next is Heightened Hearing. I'm going to put this in can be good, purely because if you're an experienced player, like you have 300, 400, 500 hours in Caves of Qud, this is probably a very good mutation that can be put in good or even great relatively easily. However, you can't look at things even if you identify them, meaning that if you're a player that doesn't know what the sprites of enemies look like, then you're out of luck. You're going to know that something's there and it's different, but that's all you're going to get, even if you technically have identified them. Next is Heightened Quickness. This depends. I would have put it in good, maybe even great before, but right now it just depends, especially with the Palladium Reef update. The introduction of Sunslag, which allows you to permanently increase your quickness, has made many of the advances previously gotten by Heightened Quickness kind of moot. While 3 points for 15 and 33 at the highest level was amazing beforehand, for now it seems to be in the same boat as the attribute enhancing mutations are. You can get higher quickness without spending mutation points. Next, we're going to get Horns. Horns is overpowered. It's incredibly overpowered. At level 20, which you can realistically get to, as it requires 3 rapid advancements and wearing the Kessel face, which means level 25, it does somewhere around, I think it was 2d13 or 2d14. For reference, a Zetachrome two-handed longsword, which is the best weapon in the game, does 2d12 with a strength cap of 9. It does not apply extra bleeding or have other effects. So not only does this at level 20 deal more damage, it also gives you 7 extra armor, which the best helmet, the Zetachrome Apex, gives 4 for reference. Not only that, but it applies a bleeding effect, which for one thing can be used to fuel biodynamic cells, and for another it does a lot of damage at high levels, and allows you to hit an enemy once and then run away while they die if you can't fight them normally. In addition, you get some extra Passive Antelopes and Goat Book, which is okay, it's not really that good. And then another good thing about Horns is that it automatically attacks when you're charging. So if for some reason you aren't using Horns as your primary weapon, you get a free attack while you're charging anyways. In addition to that, it's a weapon you can use to occupy the head slot. That means both your hands are free. So you could have Horns and a two-hander, or you can have Horns and a shield and a glow sphere, for example. And it has a practically unlimited strength cap, specifically a strength cap of 100 points. Which means you're always going to be able to do more damage. And with specialized builds, you can get 10, 11, 12 penetration before level 10, which is obviously incredibly powerful. And I think that's about it. One of the only bad things about this is that if your head gets decapitated, it doesn't regrow. But if you lose one of your heads, you probably have a bigger problem than not being able to regrow horns. We have Metamorphosis. This is only for pre-release content, but right now, due to a bug that lets you permanently take the form of any creature for an unlimited amount of time at any level, it's ridiculously overpowered. You could just walk to Deathlands at level 1 and become a Chrome Pyramid if you wanted to. Although, realistically, you probably don't have this, so it doesn't really matter anyways. Next we have multiple arms. Multiple arms can be good. One of the only problems that's very difficult to get real use. Even at level 10, you don't have that high of a chance of them to activate. So they're more for something like a shield or a torch or glow sphere than actually damaging. There's only two ways to actually have multiple arms attack more likely or guaranteed. Flurry guarantees your extra arms will attack, and jab means that if you have a sword blade in them, they'll attack twice as often. Then we have multiple legs. Multiple legs depends. It has a lot of very, very good things attached to it, but it costs 5 points. And one of the best things about it is that you can actually intentionally contract Iron Sank, and any level 4 or above will get rid of movement penalty, and then you have +5 armor, which is obviously ridiculously powerful. But yeah, the carry capacity is also nice, but there's other ways to get it, and carry capacity normally isn't too much of an issue unless you're going with an extra build, in which case you probably can't use this mutation anyways. Next is Night Vision. Night Vision's pretty awful. It's 1 point that's a bit of a waste. It only has an area of 5, which is good in the early game. If you're a very new player, I'd say that this could be good. If you're like very new, like you haven't gone past Bedrock, because it lets you use a bronze 2-handed sword at the start of the game, which will increase your damage a lot and hopefully let you get past Bedrock, but it's not very good past Bedrock. It has less range than a glow sphere or a floating glow sphere, and neither of those are too rare. Next we have phasing. Phasing, it mostly depends. It's a lot of points for 4 specifically, and it doesn't last all that long, but it has a lot of fun interaction. So if you knew what you were doing with this, it could definitely be very, very powerful. Next we have photosynthetic skin. I'm going to say photosynthetic skin is a pretty good mutation, mainly because it's low cost. I recommend it to those who want some quickness on a budget. And the fact that you can store starch and lignin and then add it in cooking recipes with Spicer is good. Since most advanced recipes only require 2 ingredients to get their primary effect, you can simply tack on your extra quickness whenever you eat a meal, which allows you to get it most of the time. And extra killing is nice. It does have a few other concerns. It gives quite a lot of reputation, which is, of course, quite nice. And, however, it does make you be damaged by defoliant, and you bleed sap, which you can get stuck in, and you can't use to fuel biodynamic cells. So no more walking in practice to fuel your biodynamic cells. Next we have Quills. Quills are pretty bad. The main reason is that they don't give much armor. They're 1 more point than Carapit. The Quill Sling doesn't do much damage, and more importantly, there's an awful penetration cap of only 6, meaning it becomes useless before it even reaches its maximum penetration. And the damage reflection that you get when creatures attack you in melee doesn't actually count, or at least I don't think it actually counts for the purpose of cooking effects. Next is Regeneration. Regeneration can be good. I think it's good if you want a very consistent run. You don't want to bother with losing a limb, or you don't want to be bothered with fungal infections or diseases, and I'd say it just makes the game a bit more simpler. However, it's 4 points, doesn't do anything else besides that. One of the main things is that it does, at level 10, guarantees you regrow all your limbs at the end of every turn, and means you're immune to decapitation, meaning decarbonizers are never a threat. But they're somewhat difficult to get caught in anyways. Next we have Sleep Gas. Sleep Gas is kind of bad. Creatures with high enough toughness can kind of ignore it. It doesn't really do that much damage, and Corrosive Gas is just better in almost every way. Next we have Spinnerets. Spinnerets definitely can be good. However, it requires a lot of specialized builds to be really good. Specifically, you need to be spinning phase webs instead, and then cook with phase silk and it requires a lot of work to be good. However, if you can make it good, it definitely is good. It also makes it almost impossible to get stuck, which means you can explore the asphalt mines extremely easily. Next we have Stingers. Stingers are and they're pretty meh. The Confuse and Stinger only has 3 points, and the other 2 Stingers, they just don't do that much damage compared to other things at the same point cost, especially Horns. And the other effects aren't that good. Poison's damage is covered by Horns, bleeding damage. Confusion can make it hard to attack your enemies, meaning that you can't really take full advantage of them not attacking you. And Paralysis is just difficult to use and doesn't last all that long. Then we have Thick Fur. Thick Fur, I'm actually going to put in Great. And even though a new player, this is probably the best one-pointer for a new player, since it increases your reputation with baboons by 100, making them neutral. I actually referenced this in my Red Rock tutorial video, that having Thick Fur is incredibly good. It also gives you +5 heat and cold resist, which is okay, but the main thing is reputation with baboons is very useful. Then we have Slime Glands. Slime Glands is, I'm going to say it's pretty bad. It has some niche uses, but it's more of a just, I have an extra point, I don't know how to spend it. And if you're a experienced player, I'd honestly say it's probably better than Thick Fur. But for anyone else, that's just not good. Then you have Triple Jointed, which again gets put in here, can be good for the same reason as Double Muscle. It's mostly a point dump, and you can get extra agility in other ways. Not to mention the fact that not many abilities have agility cooldowns. And while you technically could theoretically use an ability like, say, Empty the Clips a ton of times in a row if you have this at a high level, that's not very common. Next we have Two-Headed. Two-Headed depends. It can be good, but it's good for hybrid espers, but the people that could make the most use of this, being espers, can't use it, which is why it's in depends. If you're a hybrid, it's pretty good. It also prevents decapitation, which is pretty nice, or makes you harder to be killed. And then Double-Hearted, you probably know the drill by this point. It can be good, but it's more of a point depth than anything else. Then we have Wings. I'm going to say Wings also can be good. I would say before the Palladium Reef update that they were depends, or maybe even good, because it lets you explore the map easily, for one thing. It gives you a nice diverse set of movement bonuses, and most importantly, if you're struggling with Golgotha, it lets you travel through the deep shaft to enter straight to the Cloaca without getting killed by soup crabs or anything else along the way there. However, with the Palladium Reef update, you can simply go to Kipper or Seth and purchase Bop Cheek, and cook with that until you get the effect. You take 90% less damage from falling. This beats even Truecan rubber gum injectors, which provide a 75% increase to bludgeoning damage, which includes falling. And it means that you don't need Wings anymore. If you cook with Bop Cheek and you get the effect, makes you take less damage, you can go right down there, even if you're a relatively fragile character, without much risk of dying. As long as you have more than 50 health, you should be good. And that's all the mutations. So here's the final tier list, guys. I'm going to be leaving now. Make sure to like and subscribe. Bye!